My inheritance has cost me. The car and gadgets are nice. And I've almost gotten used to the smell in the cave. It's the criminals. Since my father died, they've focused their attention on me.
Hey man, somebody killed this lady.
And the people around me. My father's enemies have gotten more twisted with age, more violent and suicidal.
Crashing this train with no survivors.
Because they know their inevitable end is near. They've seen Batman die. They've seen each other die.
I can't believe they killed him. Yeah, man, things are getting really bad out here.
The Riddler.
This puzzle is far more than any mere game.
Dr. Death.
You and I go way back, Batman.
Two-Face.
I still believe in Harvey Dent.
All gone. Like the life I hoped for beyond this mask. Everything I have, everything I am, is because of him. I'm the Batman's daughter. I am the Huntress. And tonight, I'm hunting the man who destroyed my life.
Hello and welcome to the Huntress Podcast. This is episode 58, brought to you by the Right On Network. We're talking about Helena Wayne here in Wonder Woman 272. It's a backup, it is. I'm Ashford, and along with me is Laurel. Hello, Laurel.
Hello, Ashford.
And we also have Diane with us. Hello, Diane.
Hello, Ashford.
So this is cool. We're continuing the story where at the cliffhanger of the last episode, we saw a one Solomon Grundy. Yeah, this is cover date October 1980. It does have a title. The Monster and the Masterpiece. Wow. So this was a pretty crazy one. I like the time period. I like going back and doing this research about this character, Helena Wayne, and seeing her interact because we read a bunch of stories where she was with the Justice Society of America, and we're back to seeing her flying solo and also trying to navigate a personal life and being a hero. Pretty cool stuff. Diane, can you give us the synopsis to this one?
Absolutely. Picking up from the events of Into Darkness once more, Helena Wayne comes face to face with Solomon Grundy at the Gotham Museum, ready to loot the place. The Huntress attempts to leverage her credentials as a Just Society member to come off as threatening to Grundy, but is only promptly knocked unconscious by Grundy, who doesn't take her seriously. The next day at the office, Helena sees Harry Sims about the problem he came to visit her about at 3 a.m. After hearing his case, Helena does not feel as though she's in a position to help, as this problem conflicts with her interest in consumer law. While attempting to get back to work, Helena finds a note from Winston Pitt, which reminds her of her late-night discovery that the torched paintings at the museum were forgeries of his work. She then pays Sidney, the fence, another visit for a second interrogation about the person who commissioned the forgeries, which brings her back to Solomon Grundy. Helena arrives prepared for the second fight with Grundy, and although she is successful at taking out his henchmen, she is once again taken out by Grundy. And this concludes the Wonder Woman 272 story, The Monster and the Masterpiece.
Do you believe in ghosts? I'm not sure I do, but I've been running away, towards, and for them all my life. Nightly, the ghosts of my parents' legacy visit my anxieties more than any of my enemies ever could. Daily, I keep a close hush on all the secrets that must be kept but so desperately want to be liberated. I'm one of the few so-called heroes who actually keep his friends close and his enemies closer. I am the Batman, and I think this is the time where I let my enemies go, and the secrets lift their veils ever so slightly. But of course, this is something I must keep to myself. Hush.
Tune in to Feathers and Foes, covering Batman's Hush on the Right On Network. Just go to thehuntress.podcast.com to find the latest episode of us covering Hush. Or go to any of the podcatchers, the Batgirl /Huntress, to listen to Laurel, Mark, and Ashford talk about this early 2000s Batman story, which is no secret. Hush.
Okay, well, let's look at this thing in a little more detail. Actually, why don't we just start with the overall opinion? Ashford, what did you think of this little story? This sort of the middle of the story.
I thought it was pretty cool, and I forgot to mention, this is by writer Paul Levitz. On pencils, we have Joe Staton, of course, inker Steve Mitchell, and on colors, which she is all over the place during this era in DC, Adrian Roy, letterer Ben Oda, and editor Lynn Wayne, big fan favorites. I just thought it was fun stuff because I like that we have Solomon Grundy as this mob gangster leader of henchmen. So I thought that was cool. And of course, Helena just swinging into action, being that hero that we all love. I got a lot of bang for my bucket. The only problem, the story was too short.
Diane?
So even though we've got about 8 pages of content here, it's doing a lot in those 8 pages. So on the one hand, it's picking up on what was going on in the previous issue. So now we know that, you know, that the paintings that got torched in the museum are actually forgeries of the work. They're not the real thing. And we also know that the person behind, you know, the forgeries is Solomon Grundy, who most likely stole the originals, probably to sell in the black market. But he went to the museum to loot it, you know, for its valuables. And he especially wanted to take home a statue that he fell in love with, you know, or the hunk of stone that he fell in love with, as Helena Wayne herself puts it, you know. So that's one storyline right there, and that's the primary storyline, but it's also setting up a few other storylines down the road. So for example, you know, last issue we were introduced to the character of Harry Sims. And Harry, you know, our first impression of Harry was probably not a great one. You know, he showed up at Helena Wayne's door at 3 a.m, and of course everyone is going to think, okay, if you're here at 3 a.m, you're here for something else, you know. And while, you know, Harry clarifies that no, that's not really the case, you know, we do by teasing that he was, you know, or at least by teasing the idea that, you know, he went there to get laid, you know, he went to Helena's place for that, you know. They're kind of also teasing a potential romantic relationship between these two characters. So that's one thing that's being, you know, that was one thing that was being, you know, teased in that first issue. And so we see Harry again in this issue, and although we don't see much of him or what he and Helena Wayne talked about, you know, we're going to see this character in a recurring capacity in the future stories. And in the future stories, he's going to be established as a romantic partner. So that's being set up in this issue as well. And then another thing that happens in that very same scene. So previously, we were also introduced to the character of Carol Martin, who is the secretary. And we see her again in that same scene with Harry and Helena at her law firm. So we know that Carol has something going on, you know, so she needs to get to the post office in order to put some mail or to mail some money, but we don't know who she's mailing that money to or why. So that's also setting up a future storyline with that character. And then we get back to the main storyline, which is, you know, the Solomon Grundy storyline. So we find out that Solomon Grundy wanted to steal a statue because he fell in love with it, but then we don't really learn why he stole everything else. So he basically, we don't really, I mean, he does tell his henchmen, you know, take whatever you like, you know, I don't care, right? But then why destroy the forgeries, or why destroy forgeries of Winston Pitt's paintings?
Oh, and that was because they needed the museum to open their vault. Mm-hmm. And they thought by destroying those paintings, it would prompt the museum to open the vault so they could put something else up on the wall.
Right, but then why destroy the forgeries? What happened to the originals?
I would think that he probably kept them, like you were saying.
Yeah, but the thing that frustrates me there is that they don't really revisit the reason, for why he took the paintings, or if he even took the actual paintings. So it's kind of left to the reader to decide, what happened with the originals, So that's kind of the only thing, is that, okay, so we learned the reason that Solomon Grundy loots the museum. He wanted to steal a statue, and he just lets his henchmen take whatever they want. But then what happened to the original paintings, which is, the event that started this storyline, that's not mentioned. And that's kind of the main flaw of the conclusion, is that we don't find out, where Winston's actual paintings are, the forgeries that got torched, what happened to those paintings.
You think the fence got him?
Probably. I mean, he obviously knew something about about the person who commissioned the fakes, and he even admitted in the previous story that, they couldn't even get forgeries of the work. So I guess that's what tipped off Helena, that he knew something about forgery. So yeah, I would say that's my only issue with this one story, is that they just kind of forget about Winston's actual paintings, once we get to Solomon Grundy, or once we get to the story establishing that Solomon Grundy wanted the statue, but then no one mentions the paintings ever again. So,
well, I want to look in a little more detail at what happens with Solomon Grundy. At least her initial foray with him. I know at the end of the last section, she was, she knew she might be out of her league. She's a little bit hesitant there, but she does stride forward and confront him. What I'm not understanding is why she tried to take him on in what looks like hand-to-hand combat. That seemed like bad tactics, and I don't see her doing that. When she comes in the second time, and she's using the smoke bomb, and she tries to use the tranquilizer darts on him, that really worked, because now she's trying to defeat him with her mind instead of, physically, because she's not going to be able to do that. So I didn't understand why she charged out into the room the first time. Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, the thing is that when she went to the museum, she was not expecting to find him there. She was expecting, I guess some normal thief or some, regular, I think she went in there expecting a regular normal theft. She was not expecting someone like Solomon Grundy to be there. And so she didn't come prepared that first time, because she didn't expect to encounter Grundy. And the reason why she's able to, fight him more effectively the second time is because she knows what she's up against now, but that wasn't the case previously. She went to the museum to once again reinvestigate, the forgeries. And then when she got there, she discovered that Solomon Grundy was there to loot. And so she kind of had to make do with what she had in that moment, and she didn't have all the tools or the mental resources to really think things through, so she just kind of winged it, basically.
What I'm wondering is if she would have been better off tracking them than confronting them when she knows that she's not ready. Maybe she's better off. I mean, Batman had like his tracker thing. Let's say she doesn't have something, that she could put on them, electronics or something. Let's say she just follows them to their hideout and says, all right, I know where they are now. I'm going to go get prepared and come back.
Well, keep in mind, too, that Helena Wayne is kind of still new at, being a superhero at this point in her life. Because the thing is that, okay, so even though her mum died in 1976, and that was her first real case as a Huntress, right? And it was implied that she kind of, operated in an underground capacity, while her dad was alive, It wasn't until, 1979 that she actually joined the JSA. And she actually worked with them for the first time, and that was also around the time that her father died as well. So this is her first real case as, operating in Gotham openly compared to before. And this is her first, case with a Justice Society villain without the assistance of the Justice Society. So she's still figuring out, she's still gaining experience. So she's not fully experienced at this point in her life yet. So she's making a lot of rookie mistakes as a result. So if we take into account, where Helena Wayne is at this point in her heroic career. You know, she's still new at this game, and this is her first, you know, dangerous threat that she encounters by herself without the Justice Society. Because at least before, when she was fighting, you know, the Golden Age Huntress, when she was fighting the Golden Age Huntress, and when she was fighting Thorn, and when she was fighting, who else did she fight with the Justice Society? Well, when she was fighting even with the Justice League, you know, when she was fighting those particular threats, she had a whole team to support her, and she doesn't have that now. So she's actually, so she's actually still learning. That's what I'm attributing, you know, her mistakes here to.
And I like that, as far as this is her first official case, and that case happened to be against art theft and Solomon Grundy, so it's pretty cool.
So you're happy with it?
I'm happy with it. I'm disappointed that there isn't more, unless there is, and I just don't know. There isn't more about the forgeries, and we really have the real art pieces over here. I'm disappointed that is going by the wayside, that storyline.
Mm-hmm. What did you think? Here's another interesting little bit. The fight itself, things got really intense when he grabs her by the cape and throws her. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how is she not going to go splat? It just, wow. I thought she's laying on the floor, and I don't know.
She takes a blow to the back of the head?
Yeah, well, initially when he first hit her, and she plopped, and then she fights back against the gunman, kicking from the floor, kicking upwards. And it wasn't until he got a really good hold on her that things went really sideways. But, you know, 2 big blows from him is probably enough to do anybody in.
Yes.
What did you think about the the romance with the statue bit?
Oh boy. I was just wondering, because I've read this before, but it's been a while. So I was like, is this statue enchanted? Is this like, hey, this is my species, a stiff? I mean, I don't know. So I was thinking, what's going on here? I started thinking about Mannequin back in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. I remember that movie.
Oh, yeah. What about you, Diane?
Well, the first thing that this storyline with Solomon Grundy and the statue reminded me of was the story of Pygmalion and the sculptor who sculpted, you know, this most beautiful woman, you know, of a statue, and he falls in love with the statue. And I forgot who was the deity, the Greek deity that actually turned the statue into a real person that, you know, Pygmalion could, you know, realistically love and spend the rest of his life with. Was it Aphrodite or Cupid? I don't remember. Or Eros. Was it Eros? I don't remember. But yeah, it reminded me of that story, and I think that there's going to be a reference to that story in the 3rd chapter of the story that we're covering for Helena Wayne. But yeah, I felt that, you know, when I first read that story, you know, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, this is just like that, you know, Greek mythology story with Pygmalion, you know, who sculpted, you know, a beautiful woman, and he falls in love with the sculpture that he made, and a Greek god, you know, granted his wish, and so he got to live happily ever after with his own creation there, which is kind of creepy when you think about it. But yeah, it's so that's what I thought of, and I thought, oh well, I guess Paul Levitz drew inspiration from that story for Solomon Grundy. But I guess it's a little less creepy in Solomon Grundy's case, because he's not a human person. He's, you know, he's a swamp monster. He's made out of swamp matter, you know, so he's not really human, not that I'm aware of. And so he's just kind of, you know, made of substance, kind of in the same way that the statue is made of substance. And so he's, I guess he wanted a mate, and he just couldn't find another lady made of swamp matter like him, so he went with the next best thing, a stone statue. Kind of makes sense in Grundy's case, you know, can't really fault him or blame him for that. There's kind of a shortage of his type. So
I like how the question differentiated both Diane and myself, where She said, this reminds me of Pygmalion. And I said, oh, this reminds me of this 80s movie with a musical montage. And also, is there a version of Solomon Grundy? I thought there may have been a version of Solomon Grundy where he was a mob dude, killed, then cursed? Or is he just swamp matter?
My understanding, now I think it keeps changing, to be honest, but my understanding was it was some sort of a big shot guy that used to throw his weight around, if I understand, maybe was corrupt, something like that. So I always was under the impression that he was killed and this is actually his bones, in a way. But I'm not sure if that's correct, or am I just copying Swamp Thing, or what? That confuses me.
I'm looking it up right now. Let's see what Wikipedia says.
The source of all knowledge.
As the source of all the borrowed knowledge that everyone else wrote about. Yeah.
Hey, I put it to you this way: don't drag Wikipedia, because hey, pick a beloved fandom, write some falsities on there, see how fast you get thrown out.
Well, according to what is currently on there, it says, in the late 19th century, a wealthy merchant named Cyrus Gold is murdered and his body is disposed of in Slaughter Swamp near Gotham City. 50 years later, the corpse is reanimated as a huge shambling figure composed partly of swamp matter that has accumulated around the body over the decades. With almost no memory of his past life, Gold murders 2 escaped criminals who are hiding out in the marsh and steals their clothes. He shows up in a hobo camp. When asked about his name, one of the few things he can recall is that he was born on a Monday. One of the men at the camp mentions that the nursery rhyme character Solomon Grundy, who was born on a Monday, and Gold adopts the moniker. Strong, vicious, and nearly mindless, Solomon Grundy falls into a life of crime, or perhaps returns to one, as his scattered residual memories may indicate, attracting the attention of Green Lantern Alan Scott. So, yeah, so it looks like you're not too far off base, Laurel. He starts out, living in the 1800s, seemingly. So he's a wealthy merchant, apparently, and he's not actually a criminal. And he's apparently murdered at some point, and he's disposed of, and his remains got animated when it got, merged with swamp matter. So
yeah, somewhere along the line I got the impression that the person wasn't good, the Cyrus person. He was a piece of work.
I mean, that could be a post-crisis retcon. I only read the pre-crisis version of it, so...
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't know. It's always curious to know how these kind of... I mean, we had the monster moniker put on him at the beginning, the monster and the masterpiece. So it is always interesting to see how these monsters came about. Made or created, how did it happen? Why are they the way they are? Because sometimes that really is helpful. He's just such a mindless monster figure that we're not getting quite the same motivation that we might get from a different kind of villain.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's not like DC makes it easy for you to know, what the actual origin of these characters are, because they keep changing it with every reboot. So, so for the sake of this story, I read the pre-crisis origin because that's the origin that's relevant to the story we're covering. So I don't think you're too far off. So yeah, technically he was a person, but, his remains is no longer the person. So, so from what I'm understanding, at least from the Wikipedia entry, he started out as a human being. He was murdered, and then his body was dumped in a swamp. Poor guy. And so his remains is actually what became Solomon Grundy. So the remains, in combination with swamp matter, resulted in the birth of this whole other creature. And I guess he remembered born on a Monday, and so someone thought of the nursery rhyme Solomon Grundy and that's how he got his name. So yeah, technically he's the remains of a dead person merged with swamp water, so I guess he's not really human, and I'm not sure that you can consider the remains of a dead human to be human.
Yeah, no, it sounds like the swamp made him into something completely different. It's well, not completely, because he's still man-shaped, but it made him into this thing, I guess is the best way to put it. One other thing about the fights in this, because I was saying earlier that when he grabs her by the cape, that's upsetting. But what's really creeping me out is when he has Helena by the neck and he's choking her out. That it's pretty dramatic at the end. Did that disturb either one of you as much as it did me? Because I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the visual of it. It's just like, oh my goodness gracious, this is really bad. What's going to happen to her?
Well,
yes.
You want to go first, Ashford?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, well, the one thing that's pretty chilling about that scene is that he literally threatens to crush his skull into multiple pieces like she did the statue, and Helena's entirely powerless there. So the threat of him actually doing that becomes real when you take that into account. So he's got, so Helena's passing out, and that black panel at the end, suggests that she passed out at that point. So the threat of death became very real at that point. So I can see why that, particular sequence would be very chilling for you, Laurel. She's genuinely in danger there.
Yeah, it's, he's got her by the neck, and it was just like, oh God.
And we see here where, well, one, there was build up to the scene. We see Solomon Grundy and his men, they actually steal the statue. We're seeing these scenes where he's admiring it. So when it's about to fall, and Helena was concerned about, like, oh no, because she was also aware of, like, hey, some of this art is invaluable. So when it breaks, we as the audience, we understand, like, oh no, this isn't just some random statue. This is something that Solomon Grundy's really into. So we're like, oh no. And for us to see one panel of her being choked out, then a close-up of him looking like, we understand that he may be mindless, but now we see him with rage, and then a panel of blackout. Yeah, you were left disturbed.
Yeah, the art on this is really good. He even has a tear in his eye. So, and I do, speaking of the art, still like that her mask and cape combo does project the bat shadow. I always like that kind of nod to her background by making that shadow.
Batman casts a long shadow.
I think we've done what we're going to do here with Solomon Grundy. Let's flip to the other storyline in here, well, one of, where it's her coming into work, apparently looking really bad because they're all like, oh my goodness, shouldn't you be home in bed? We've got that part, and Harry coming in to tell her something. We don't get to find out what that is, and she's feeling upset about not being able to do whatever. She says his case is dead center in my favorite areas of consumer law, and all I can do is crumple papers, because she's throwing papers at the wastebasket. And I assume that means because her mind is just overwhelmed with the case and that kind of thing, because this is in between the two fights with Solomon Grundy. But it was interesting to see her doing the job thing. I think you guys talked before about how she pulls her hair back for this and goes into a, Helena Wayne mode. I appreciate that in this.
Yeah, it's definitely, she does a very good job at separating her Helena Wayne life with her Huntress life, and artist Joe Staton did a really great job with the character design there, because he tried to make Helena Wayne as quote-unquote physically different from the Huntress as possible, to not tip away, that the Huntress is really this, lawyer who is also, so she works with the law, but now she also works outside the law. But I think the main thing to talk about with this scene is, we see the way that Helena Wayne interacts with Harry in this scene, which is consistent with the way that she interacted with him in the previous story. Now we all know that this character is going to eventually become her love interest, or he's gonna become a boyfriend a bit later on in her timeline. So I guess the question is, do you think their relationship is off to a good start if this is how they communicate to each other?
No, not at all. That's honestly his introduction, and knowing that he's going to be an interest to her. I'm just sitting here going, why? I'll be curious to see if they develop him further, because right now he just seems like this whiny, dependent person, and I don't understand what she could possibly see in this guy. I wish they had shown us the conversation just so I could have seen how that relationship might work, because, man, right now he's not exactly presenting himself well. Ashford, what do you think?
I echo your thoughts, Laurel. Same.
So here's the thing that we know about Harry so far. Okay, so the first time that we meet him, he shows up at Helena Wayne's door at 3 a.m. to talk about a business matter. So right there, it's being established that he doesn't have a concept of personal boundaries, because any reasonable human being would know that, showing up at someone's door at 3 a.m. to talk about business matters is just not a thing that anyone does. It's not just rude, but it's very inconsiderate.
It's slightly bizarre, yeah.
It's very unprofessional too. So, so he doesn't have a concept of personal boundaries. He doesn't even seem to have a concept of professional boundaries either, because, you don't just show up at a lawyer's house. Even if you're the district attorney of Gotham, you don't just show up at another person's house, another lawyer's house, especially a woman's house, and say, yeah, I need your help with something. It's like, and so Helena Wayne was very right to tell him, you know what, you being here at 3 a.m. implies that you're here for something else, which is already pretty bad in itself. So she was right to call him out on that. And she was also right to call him out on the fact, okay, if you're coming here to talk about business matters, come visit me during actual office hours, not when I'm supposed to be sleeping, So she was right to call him out on both of those things. So we got that. And then when he actually shows up, in her office the next day, right? Right now we're getting, Harry Sims as the district attorney, but if he is unable to do his own job, why is he district attorney? Is usually the first thing that comes to my mind. If Helena Wayne can do his job better than he can, why is she not the district attorney in this case? Because it just comes off. So he comes off as not particularly good at his job, for one. So he might be perhaps a little incompetent, or maybe he's biting more than he can chew. The profession that he's in, he seems to come off as a bit inexperienced, which is unusual, because in order for you to become a district attorney, in order for you to be elected as a district attorney, you have to have a considerable amount of experience under your belt. So how old is Harry here exactly? I'm going to assume he's in his 30s at least. He late 20s, early 30s at least. So he has to have been doing this for quite a couple of years at least. So to build on your point that he comes off as whiny and dependent, yeah, he's not really off to a great start, and I can see why it's hard to see, especially this very early on, why he may not be a great match for Helena. You would like for her to be matched up with someone who can actually challenge her on equal footing, but can also be a valuable partner to her in the sense that he can actually add value to her life, not deplete her, not deplete her of her emotional energy. And right now this is how this character's coming off. But yeah, I have to agree with you both. We get that that first story was basically hinting at a future romantic relationship between these two characters, but it was also not handled in a way that makes you think that Helena would want to be with this guy. She looks like the type who'd want better.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just like, why would this so maybe we'll get more development with him, and that'll sort of answer the question of why at some maybe he's got to grow into his role or something. I don't know, but making him the district attorney did not seem like a good thing to do with somebody that has this much doubt in themselves, or doubt about whatever it is he's wanting to consult her about. It just doesn't come off. Like you're saying, they're not equals sharing information and advice with each other, comparing case notes or something. I could have gotten behind that, but this is just, no, this doesn't work. I did like the reoccurrence of the fence. We didn't mention him. I did like that she went back to him.
Oh, Sydney.
Yeah, doing the detective thing, finding out where they are, that kind of thing. I like that was a callback in this. So he was established already. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. That didn't feel like something out of left field that they just made up on the go. No, it was already established, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in the mystery novels or the, mystery books like this, and they don't play fair because, all of a sudden somebody shows up with a piece of information that you're like, well, where did this come from? And that didn't make any sense. So I'm glad that they established, no, she has a knowledge of the criminal element so that she can get the information from them. She knew to go looking for this guy.
I think Go ahead. I think my absolute favorite thing about the scene that you're talking about now that you're, getting in depth with that, notice that, okay, so when we see Sydney again, he's, upping his security system and she's still bypassed that. So
yeah, that's true.
It's so building off of what you're saying about how she's very resourceful like that, she's also resourceful in how she can break and enter, So I guess we could see this. I guess this is how we see her Catwoman qualities, because even though Bruce Wayne will also be very skilled in breaking and entering, he's got all the tools and he's got all kinds of gadgets to facilitate that, but it takes skill to break in unnoticed, and that's more of Selina Kyle's expertise as Catwoman. So the fact that she was able to just sneak in completely unnoticed, even though he upped the security system, that requires skill. So she has, so what this shows here is that Helena definitely has knowledge of very advanced security systems, and she most likely learned from her mother how to disable those security systems and how to go in unnoticed. That's a uniquely Catwoman trait right there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have put that together. Thanks for pointing that out. I didn't put that together. But you're right. It's the representation of the things that she learned from her mother. That's really neat.
Yeah, I do like that, they emphasize that it's not that Helena Wayne is not just Batman's daughter. She's as much Catwoman's daughter as she is Batman's daughter. And so we kind of see a little bit of both of their traits in the character, So we see the detective skills and the disappearing act from Batman in Helena Wayne when she, is functioning as a huntress, but we also see her ability to break and enter completely unannounced, completely unnoticed, and she knows how to disable advanced systems. So we get to see, what traits and what skills she learned from both of her parents when we see her operate as a huntress. So that, you can't ignore that. It's actually great that, Paul Levitz and Joe Staton, developed the character in such a way that she's very much an homage to both of her parents, but she's still, different enough to actually stand out as her own character. What about you, Ashford? You got any thoughts on that?
I would just echoing the same thing, showing that she's carrying two legacies, yet paving her own way. And that's what we're focused on in this book. I like what Laurel is saying as far as revisiting this character, because we're building an infrastructure for her. We're seeing her at the law firm. We're seeing her like in the first story where, hey, you got to remember, she's also a socialite. She grew up in wealth, so she would know things about the art world. We're seeing her fighting Solomon Grundy and also getting informant information from a fence and other things as well.
So I think
go
ahead.
No, go ahead.
I guess the only thing left to talk about at this point is the character of Carol, who was introduced in the previous storyline. And she actually gets her own storyline teased in this story that is actually going to be picked up a bit later on. So we're actually going to learn more about why Carol is doing what she's doing. But what's your impression of Carol, from just seeing, her actions of, oh, good, they cleared the room. I can finally, do what I have to do, put this money in the post office, before, the afternoon mail gets here. What's your impression of Carol so far?
Well, the first thing I thought, because we're also on the Right On Network, we're doing the Jim Aparo, Mike W. Barr, Batman and the Outsiders, where they did something similar. This book came out 1980, 1985. a similar time period where we're going to tease this kind of ongoing storyline. So when that happened, the first thing I thought was, this is so the era. So like they even helped us out with giving us a narration box with, hey, we'll tease that out later. Like they actually said, we'll learn more about that later. We're just throwing that out there. So pay attention to that, folks. And since that's something they really don't do now, I just appreciate it. So like in a lot of different media, I'm going back and reading and watching older stuff and just kind of appreciating, we used to do this. We don't do it now. Sometimes we might pay an homage to it. So I just thought, well, you know, we'll see what happens with that outcome when we get there. But the first thing I thought was like, oh, okay, so they're going to do something with this character. She's not just background filling. And this is just of the era. I don't want to say trope, but a trope of the era.
Wasn't she shook up last time? She was, she said something like she couldn't concentrate as well as she wanted to. I think there were like spelling errors or something in the memo. So we know that she's wound up about something. And I get the impression it's probably blackmailed some sort, of course, because she's putting the money in the thing. But on the other hand, I think she seems, I don't know, she seemed capable to me for some reason. She's handling what she needs to handle here. I don't know why that's the impression I got, but that was my first impression. She's not shrinking from this, whatever this is, at least not yet.
Well, I will say, without getting into detail or without getting into spoilers, that you're not off the mark there.
That's everything I have, really. I enjoyed this. I liked that when she comes after Solomon Grundy the second time, she's a little bit better prepared, and hey, she still loses, but she, had a plan. That I like that. She took out all the henchmen, and the only reason that he's not down is because he's some sort of monster. And, she's just going to have to learn how to do that, Diane. I think you're right. So I like the touch of downtime where we get her office and we get a little bit of a surrounding cast. We get the fence cat, as I said before, I like that that's reoccurring. I'm curious if we'll see him or those like him in other episodes so she can really know the city and know its underbelly. But yeah, I like this. I think it's a good little middle. It feels like a middle because, you have the confrontation at the beginning and this sort of very big cliffhanger at the end. So we're just sort of putting this sort of in the middle. But on the other hand, it's not obnoxiously so when you're like, why am I reading this? It's just filler. No, there's stuff going on in this. They made this middle chapter really work.
Yeah, it's very much following a 3-act structure. So we got, the first act in the previous issue. We're getting the second act here. And so we're getting the third and final act in the next issue that comes after this one. But I think the only remaining thing left to bring up at this point is that one of Helena Wayne's most famous tropes gets introduced in this chapter, or in this part 2 of the story. And that is the fact that Helena Wayne uses gas pellets or gas to stun the people that she needs to take out. So this is a tactic is actually going to show up again in the 2011 Huntress miniseries, which is Helena Wayne's introduction into the New 52 continuity. So in that scene, that second fight scene with Solomon Grundy, we see her assessing the situation. We see her, paying attention. Okay, what's going on here? How can I leverage the situation to my advantage? And she, says, okay, well, I've got this tool in my arsenal right now. I can use this as a distraction. And then while everyone's trying to figure out, oh, what the hell is this gas? I will go in and, knock them down, And, she's got a crossbow with her as well. So we're going to see this again in the 2011 miniseries, where she once again, this time in her Helena Bertinelli costume, she's going to be assessing the situation. And she's like, okay, well, I've got these tools in my arsenal. I've got, gas cans that I can use to knock these guys out. So we're going to see this again. So
I like that she's actually using the utility belt. That she's got, stuff in it, and she's got a rope attached to it and stuff. I like that we're actually using it. It's not just window dressing.
Yeah, no, she definitely has tools in there. So she doesn't just carry a crossbow and crossbow bolts. Now I do wonder where the crossbow bolts are kept. Are they kept in that back, in that huge purse she's got there, maybe? But yeah, we do get one of Helena Wayne's well-known tropes in this one, and that's her tendency to assess a situation and figure out, okay, how can I turn the situation to my favor? What tools do I've got in my arsenal that can assist me with what I need to do here? We're going to see this again. And we're definitely going to most definitely see a similar scene to the Gar scene here in the 2011 miniseries when we get to that.
I do have to say this scene where she pulls the pellet out down at the bottom of the page and she's got the heels because she's kicking somebody in the head with her, and I'm like, and then in the another one, you can see the ball earrings that she's got on. And I was just like, yeah, we're out here fighting bad guys in our heels and our earrings. It was such a thing that they do.
And plenty of snark, too, because, when she throws that gas pellet for the first time, they're trying to figure out, what the hell is this, And then the other guy says, oh, it's just gas, Sam. And she, hits Sam and she says, very good. Collect your gold star. Interestingly enough, it reminded me of Amanda Waller's scene in the Suicide Squad movie, the James Gunn film. You've all seen this scene in the trailer, I'm sure, but you know that scene where King Shark is like, hand, and she's like, yes, that is your hand, very good. It just Helena Wayne's, responding to the guy saying, oh, it's just gas, Sam, and she's like, very good, collect a gold star. So
and what did you think about, he calls her a girl, where he called the statue a pretty woman? Mm-hmm. Do you think that's significant in any way?
Well, yeah, because Helena Wayne asserted immediately afterwards, my name is not girl, my name is the Huntress, and I am a member of the Just Society. Show me some respect, lad. Yeah, it's significant because Helena Wayne, did not unnotice that. She noticed it very much, so she asserted, hey, call me the Huntress. Show me some respect.
So, hey, now we actually did get some feedback, so let's continue this conversation. This was from Tim Price. He was writing this August 10th. When we talked about this opening story, check this out. It says, the episode was great and loved the discussion as always, but I'm annoyed at the DC because there's a gap in Wonder Woman on the digital platforms. They have issues number 230 and 274 and none of the in-between like this one. Seriously? There's got to be plenty of people wanting to read the Huntress backup stories and they don't have them. Just shaking my head. But hey, at least I can read them vicariously through my Huntress -1. Thanks, gang. So thanks, Tim, for that feedback. That's why I went out and I got the Huntress Origins trade paperback with these stories in them. What do you guys think about this?
Well, Tim definitely has a very valid point there that, that there are huge gaps in what's available in Wonder Woman's library on the DC Universe app. Or is it called DC Universe Infinite now? I forget. But anyway, he's absolutely right about that. But the other thing that's so frustrating about the DC Universe app as well is that you don't have the trades there either. And the thing is that, this trade now, the Huntress Origins, has been out for about a year now. And it's going to be 2. So I'm kind of wondering if DC ever plans to at least put a few trades on there. Maybe not, the newest releases, but like put some trades in there so that people can actually access those stories, in case that the individual floppy issues are not available yet for some reason. So,
well, there's that, and I don't know where to go next. If I hadn't had you to say, all right, we're doing All-Star Comics, and now we go over here to, to the Wonder Woman, or now we go over and we read this one, or whatever, it would be nice to have the list of this is where she appears and here's how. So even if they just gave you the table of contents so I know where I'm supposed to go next to find the next piece of her story, that would be something, because you have to do it yourself, and there's just no way to do it. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, about that. That's one question I get a lot from people, either on Curious Cat or on Twitter. I have people ask me, so where can I find a list of all of Helena Wayne's appearances, preferably in chronological order? So I'm actually compiling that list right now. So I've got most of pre-Crisis done. After that, it's going to be post-Crisis. And then after that, I'm going to put all her new 52 stuff on there. And I didn't think she had many appearances on Rebirth. She had cameos, I think, but I'm not going to count those. I'm going to count her actual appearances, or at least stories that acknowledge her in canon. So I guess for the Infinite Frontier era, we've got Stargirl and Infinite Frontier, the miniseries, confirming that, yeah, she does exist. So the Stargirl miniseries, or the Stargirl one-shot that we got back in May, the Spring Break special, confirmed that a mainstream Earth Zero version of Helena Wayne exists, but may have been taken out by Pedagaton through temporal manipulation. So we've got an Earth Zero Helena Wayne that's lost to time, seemingly, or at least that was what was teased in that story. And then we've got an actual Earth 2 Helena Wayne that exists in the current Infinite Frontier multiverse, but this new Earth 2 Helena Wayne is now more similar to the pre-Crisis original. So I guess we'll find out, what happened, how different this new Helena Wayne is, both on Earth 0 and Earth 2. I'm going to assume that because, the whole point of death metal was everything's canon, this new Earth 2 Helena Wayne is probably going to be an amalgamation of the pre-Crisis Earth 2 Helena, post-Crisis Earth 2 Helena, and the new 52 Earth 2 Helena. And most likely that will also be the case of the Earth Zero Huntress as well. So yeah, I think that, the Earth 2 that exists now is going to be an amalgamation of all of the Earth 2s that we've had. And as far as Helena Wayne is concerned, for the Earth Zero continuity at least, there's probably going to be a merging of all of her storylines from pre-Crisis to post-Crisis to post-Flashpoint. So we'll see how they explain how she was Helena Bertinelli in the post-Crisis continuity, because the Helena Bertinelli we have now is very different from the one that we had, post-Crisis. Post-Crisis, she looked exactly like Helena Wayne, and originally the new 52, Helena Wayne was supposed to be an amalgamation of the pre-Crisis Helena Wayne Huntress and the post-Crisis Helena Bertinelli Huntress. So we'll see how they're going to integrate that, or how they're going to address that in Infinite Frontier. Is probably going to be Jeff Johns who's going to establish what the status quo is for Helena Wayne, because he was the one who teased that a main Earth version exists.
So that's why, guys, you come to us when you want to know what is next. Read along with us as we follow the adventures of Helena Wayne. We'll guide you through it. We'll tell you what's next. We'll tell you where to find it, because Diane's impeccable categorizing and library science of organizing this with her spreadsheet, it works wonders for us. So yeah, keep tuning in to the Huntress Podcast and let us know your thoughts. You can write to us at thehuntress.podcast.com. Reach us on Twitter at Huntress Podcast. If you go to any of the podcatchers and you type in Right on Network, that is WRIGHT on Network, you will find us. Check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, where we would really appreciate if you went to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the show, give us a 5-star rating, write a review, just to trigger those algorithms so other Huntress fans can find us. It's beautiful, just so beautiful that right now a lot of Birds of Prey talk, a lot of Huntress stuff out there. Diane mentioned Infinite Frontier, where we're hoping to see Helena Wayne back on the stands in the modern day era. It's time. Let's do it. We can do this. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our lovely patrons for helping us out, putting these shows out, expanding the Right On Network like you do. But thank you to K-Say, Alan W. Wright, Delvin Sims, The Pod Crasher, Tim Price, Mark Ross, aka Clark Trent, Mark Blair, Over at the Fire and Water Podcast Network, he just had a birthday, Rob Kelly. And at Waiting for Doom and Dial F for Flanger and other podcasts, Paul Hicks. We appreciate it. The Right On Network will continue forward, and we're going to bring you more Huntress content as the time goes on. So until next time, it has been Diane, Laurel, and myself, Ashford. Bye-bye, everyone.